Hello everyone, in this tutorial I want to show you how to create a procedural rock generator with procedural material using geometry nodes. You can customize the size, the shape and the structure of the rock, so if you want to know how to create that, just watch that video. So we will start with our default cube, activate it, click on Geometry Nodes tab and create a new Geometry Nodes setup, and we disconnect the input from the output. And we will start making our rock with creating a cube. That will be our base shape, and what we are going to do now, we are going to extrude that cube sometimes, and to get some kind of random base shape, we want to deform that cube to get the random shape. And after we have that random shape, we are going to put some noise texture over it. And first of all, we are going to extrude it with an extrude node. So let's have a look at it. And now we plug the extrude mesh right in between there. And of course that looks too even. That's not a good base where we can start at. And to create some more randomness, we are going to extrude only some of the sides of the cube, and we are going to do that with a math node, which we set to less than. Of course, if you have other ways to deform that cube, so it has some random shape, you can use your method. That is nothing like that has to be done that way. I've just made some experience, and that's the way I found best for me. And we will a normal node. Where is it? Normal node. And we will plug that into the upper one, and the value goes right into the selection. And now when we decrease that value, you can see only some parts of the cube are extruded, because we are only select some of these normals. And now if we decheck the individual button, we have already something that looks pretty random, and we can continue to extrude it even more. So maybe something like that. And with these values, with the offset parameters, you can change in some way the randomness. And to get even more randomness, we will copy that a third time. And what you can do now is you can also connect these selections here. Of course, for example, you can select the top output of the first one and connect it with the last one. That gives you something strange. Or you can additionally connect the side one with the last one. That gives you some different result. So you can play with that like you want to. I will go with these parameters now. And now we will need some subdivisions. Subdivide mesh. And that will later on define the detail level of our rock. And what we're going to do now is add a transform node. And with that transform node, you can change the length of each axis, or you can rotate it. And that's pretty much the base shape of our rock. So let's make a group around that part, and we will name that, hit Ctrl J, and now F2 to rename it, and we will name that rock base shape. You can also make some experiments with other base shapes. For example, you can use an icosphere, and you can connect it with the mesh, and you will get a totally different result. So you can play with that. For now on, we will go with the cube, and now we will add the noise distortion to our base shape of our rock. And to create the noise distortion, we will add a set position node. We will need a vector math node and another vector math node. We will need a position node and my favorite noise texture, a Voronoi texture. And now we connect the position node with the upper value of the vector math node, and we take the distance output from the Voronoi texture and connect it with the lower one, and important, set this to multiply, not to add. And this one will be some kind of multiplicator to our noise distortion. So connect that with the upper one, also set it to multiply, and connect the vector with the offset. And we can't see anything because these values are set to 0. And to change that, to change them all at once, we will make a value node and connect that with the vector. And now we can change that a little bit, maybe to 0.5, and you already see our rock is distorted by the texture. You can also set the 3D to 4D, so you have some kind of seed for your noise texture, and we will set the scale to something low, maybe like that. That depends on how big your rock right now is, and that looks still a little bit shitty, so we will need a subdivision surface node. Right here, and we will need a set shade smooth node. And now you can increase the subdivisions of your mesh, and you already see that looks pretty much like a rock without texture. And now, as you can see, the shape, the base shape, you can play with the scale of your texture. And with the V parameter, you just change the seed of your texture. And with that one, with the multiply, you can change the strength of your distortion. Let's make a frame around that one. Hit Ctrl J and F2, and we will rename that rock noise distortion. And now we are going to add some more details to the surface. And to do that, we will need another set position node. And we will need a vector math node. And again, we will need a position node, and now we will need a noise texture, no Voronoi texture, and we connect that one with the vector math. By the way, the position node gives you the position of each vertex of your mesh, and with that position of each vertex, the object will be distorted with the noise texture or the Voronoi texture, and that one we'll also have to set it to multiply, and that will go into the position, and the factor goes into the lower one, and now we got the distortion on our surface. Of course, it's much too strong. We also can set it to 4D in case you want to change it, and we have to set the scale much lower, for example 0.05, 0.01. And again, that value depends on how big your object is, and we can increase the detail, and we can increase the distortion, and now we have some more details on our surface. Now that it looks a little bit too sharp maybe, so we can set it back to 0.3, and now now is the point where you can play with these values. For example, you can play with the amount of vertices of your cube, so something like that. That looks like a cube. You can now play with the extrude values, and you can play with the scale until you get something that looks like the rock you like best. I will go now with that one that looks like a rock, and now let's make a group around that, and we will name that rock surface details. And there's one thing left that we have to do, and that is we will have to give it a material with a set material node. I'm not sure if we need a realize instance node. I think we can leave it at the moment. Maybe we can add it later on, but I think we don't need it. And of course I prepared a material, and I've called that procedural stone. Let's have a look at it. So very important, because I've got many comments in my videos. Sometimes the material won't work, and that is because the standard texture coordinate is connected with the UV output, but it's important that you set it to object, or maybe generated does work too, but object is the best for the procedural material. And I've made them noise textures and just played around with it a little bit. It's that layout is nothing like that is the one stone texture, but if you like to copy mine one, you can do that, or you can create your own stone texture. So now we will go through it. We have a texture coordinate node, a mapping node, and we have 6 noise textures. I won't explain it in detail because I just tried it out, try and error. So I will leave that screen for a while so you can copy it. The textures goes into a color ramp. The color ramp, the lower one goes into a bump map. That one goes into a bump map 2. That goes into a normal map. And that one also goes into a displacement map, which goes into the displacement output. So nothing fancy here. Let's go back to our geometry nodes. And let's have a look if our material looks good. And we have the rock that we saw in the intro. Now at the moment it looks a little bit too uniform and too strong. To change that, you can go to the material and you can change the overall scale, like here. Maybe you can also add a value node and change the size of your texture. You can play with the scales of each noise texture. Some noise textures have more effect on it and some have less. And of course, the important part is where is it? Is that one with the extrude mesh, and of course the Voronoi texture. That's a really hard word for me. Sorry. And you can play with the scale here, and you see that has more effect on it, like the texture itself. So one thing last, if you want to have your controls right here in the geometry nodes panel, just take a group input and connect the values you want to change in the side view with an empty input of your group input, and you instantly have control about your rock in the modifier panel. So again, you can change, you can play with some different primitives. Right now I'm curious how a cylinder would look like. Yes, it gives is also a valuable result. So feel free to make some experience. I hope you learned something, and hope I see you in the next tutorial. Bye.